Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com.
How are we going, gentlemen?
He didn't say
it.
I was bracing myself for back for another week.
Yeah, we are back for another week.
No.
Just wanted to get a feeling for how everyone's going. Winter has come. It's still coming technically, but it's getting a bit cooler in Melbourne, which is the inner city area in which we live. And yeah, just want to see what's going on with you guys. What's happening?
It's perfect vest weather. I can see Adam's got his Lachlan Murdoch attire on, ready to go. That suggests to me there have been, maybe some walks in the park, maybe a latte. As us latte sipping coastal scum breed wankers I like to enjoy on a Sunday afternoon.
I insist on sipping lattes as I judge the livelihoods of others. It's just it's a requirement. It's no fun without it.
Yeah, it's the only way to judge as far as I'm concerned.
100%. You got to have in the background. You got to hear the whistling sound of the milk frothers just going off, and that's just the perfect soundtrack to just completely shame anyone in my general eye line.
I can't do a latte, but I can give you a cheap red wine.
Oh, is that a nice Pinot? Is that a Barossa Valley? What is that, mate?
Tempranillo or something?
Oh, Tempranillo. Oh, foreign imported wine. Oh, bloody luxury.
It's the stemless wine glass that I feel sells it for me.
Oh, no, I love a stemless wine glass, and it might be because I'm a degenerate drunk, but I love the stemless wine glass because you can't knock it over when you're drunk.
George, if you can dream it, you can do it. I reckon you could knock that glass over if you really set your mind to it. If I set my mind to it, yeah. I never understood why a latte was a less quote-unquote manly drink than a black coffee, as though true masculinity is just getting the caffeine delivery sans any kind of enjoyment, just like hooking it straight to me fucking veins right before I do a FIFO job out in, Eastern Perth. Or I don't know. I think it's the fact that if the drink is actually pleasurable to drink, it's not manly enough.
You're a bitch.
Right? If it's not a bitter, terrible, foul flavor, then you're not doing it right. And I say that as someone who is one of those craft beer wankers, and they all taste like rust. He
admits it finally.
Hey, some delicious rust with a hint of mango.
It is true. The thirst factor does increase when you get a long black, and that is partly because you're just getting less liquid, and it's not actually giving you any sustenance. It's just pure.
You can feel caffeine. It drying out your small intestine, and you're like, "Oh, I'm going to regret that later."
Yep. 100%. Speaking of regretting it later, we're a news and politics podcast, and the leading story this week is, of course, the Defence Strategic Review has been handed down.
I was going to go a different way with that segue. I was going to say, speaking of a bit of taste in your mouth, the Defence Strategic Review.
Regretting it later? I'm regretting it now.
Is it possible to have a pre-regret for something that hasn't happened yet? Pre-gret?
It's the smell you get before you taste something that isn't quite good, like where you smell the milk to see if it's off. You're like, I'm not right sure, and you have a taste of it, and you go, oh no, it's definitely off.
You smell it, and it's bad, and you're like, oh, this smells terrible, and you pass it to your wife and go, smell this. This smells terrible. She goes, that does smell terrible. Why'd you make me smell that? I'm like, I don't know. I just wanted you to be in on the sadness, I suppose.
My issue is that I don't casually just smell milk, so I'll smell it like, is this off? I don't know what milk smells like. Why did I even try that? Is that normal? Maybe it always smells bad.
There's a lot to unpack, which is Tom doesn't know what milk smells like. And I don't know if we've got time for it.
I think you might have COVID.
Yeah, I don't drink raw milk. All my milk is... No.
Haven't you ever got a Milo and you've just poured it in? You've gone, oh, I'm such a little...
Well, then I can smell the Milo. I'm not smelling the milk.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, Defence Strategic Review. So basically, what the big story this week, top story, is that the Defence
the defense industrial complex, the military industrial complex, has conducted a strategic review, and the military industrial into itself. Yeah, well, it doesn't it doesn't make much sense if they do a review into kindergartens, does it? And unless if it was, maybe education would receive funding if that were the case. But
that's a report that I would read.
So the military industrial complex has conducted a review into itself, and it's found that the military industrial complex is good, and it needs more and different stuff.
Yeah. Don't even know why we looked into it. Yeah. We're good. We're great.
Well, in terms of what it found, it was that we're not military industrialing hard enough.
That's the problem. That's the
problem. Yeah. That is the key problem. So basically, this is a review that was handed down. It was a couple of months ago, and then the public version, which has all the unclassified shit in it, which is basically all the weird wangle-fangle stuff you don't really get to hear about, that you don't really get to... there's nothing really that interesting in there. It's all just political buzzwords.
I do love a wangle-fangle.
And the top secret stuff's taken out. But basically...
Boo! Just all the parts where it says China, and they've just scribbled it out. They've redacted it and gone, not China, but someone in the South China Sea who is not China.
Quite literally, I think that's probably
I was thinking it was going to be even more brutal than that, just to be we need to be worried about our adversaries in the South Sea, and when goes for Taiwan, and
I mean not Taiwan. I mean
not Taiwan. I mean maybe Taiwan.
This
maybe
redacting
Taiwan
pen's out of control.
You want to play Mr. Albanese's words, George? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, It's been a disappointing week for the Albanese government, I think. But let's hear them say some words. So it's Anthony Albanese speaking, and then it's Richard Marles for a little bit, the Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister.
We confront the most challenging strategic circumstances since the Second World War, both in our region and indeed around the world. That's why we're investing in our capabilities and we're investing in our relationships to build a more secure Australia and a more stable and prosperous region.
And the defence posture that we have had for the last few decades has served our nation well. But in the circumstances that we now face, that defence posture is no longer fit for purpose. And so today, for the first time in 35 years, we are recasting the mission of the Australian Defence Force, which will have 5 elements to it. Firstly, to defend our nation and our immediate region. Secondly...
Yeah, up until now, I guess the Defence Force hadn't been defending our country. That's weird.
To deter through denial any adversary that seeks to project power against Australia or our interests through our northern approaches.
Whoever that might be. I think China's up there. Who knows?
Thirdly, to protect Australia's economic connection to the region and the world. Fourthly, with our partners, to provide for the collective security of the Indo-Pacific. And fifthly, with our partners, to provide for the maintenance of the global rules-based order. Now, most of those objectives as part of the new mission of the Australian Defence Force are well beyond our shores. And so we need to have a Defence Force which has the capacity to engage in impactful projection through the full spectrum of proportionate response. Today, the government is announcing that we will be focusing on 6 initial priorities. The first of those is Australia developing a nuclear-powered submarine capability, and we made significant announcements about that last month. The second is to provide for a much longer range strike capability for our Defence Force, including through the manufacturing of munitions in Australia.
Okay, so the key thing that Richard Marles is saying there is that we're basically we want some missiles and lots of strike capability, and we want to build those missiles here in Australia. And as we all know, building stuff in Australia works great. Just ask Snowy Hydro 2.0.
Snowy Hydro 2.0 just got the blood pumping. Let me say that.
Well, I'm glad it got the blood pumping because it hasn't got any fucking water pumping. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. So and yeah, I'm a huge dum-dum when it comes to like a lot of this what this military strategic planning and all that sort of stuff means. I know, Adam, you're way more versed in this and all that sort of stuff. But
Been reading the fuck out of this whole thing. Then I tried reading the actual report and I fell asleep after page 2.
Fell asleep. Nice. But a lot of that, of what we just heard, particularly from Richard Miles, sounds like, you know, someone got just a copy editor to write up saying but not saying we need to be good at fighting war outside, like overseas.
Outside of Australia. Yeah.
Our military needs to be better at, I don't know, deploying into places and like, I don't know, fucking destabilizing governments. I don't know, like.
No. Yeah. We leave that stuff to the US. I think it's more about like having a strike capability that's outside of Australia. So they're saying our current strike capability is like we can attack something 50 kilometers away, and we want to be able to strike stuff that's 500 kilometers away. Now, the only reason you will need to do that in the region is if you want to present if you want to present some sort of like denial calculus to the Chinese. Like they're the only other people anywhere near the sort of region that might have something that we would want to, you know, say like, hey, you can't take all these places up in the South China Sea because the calculus is now that we've got long range missiles, and maybe you want to take that into account before you do anything fucked up.
Well, it's also about so just at the moment, the army in particular is, and look, there have been rumours and talk discussions in defence circles for the last 2 or 3 years, really, when throughout the various submarine projects that we've had. I think we're up to about 3 or 4 now. One of the things that's been discussed.
One more, and we actually get a free one on the punch card.
Get a free submarine. One of the things that we've sort of started to realise now that we've sort of transitioned away from the war on terror is that, you know, with hypersonic missiles and everything else, that the missile age, particularly when it comes to naval warfare, is particularly important. So China currently has the largest navy in the world. For fun, there's sensibly no reason. There's no reason why they need that.
Hey, Adam, I've always been a dreamer. So you're saying there's a chance?
So at the moment, the army, for instance, is set up with 3 sort of brigades that are mechanized effectively. They include their own air support and armor and artillery. But we were previously spending a shitload of money upgrading all our APCs, armored personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles, buying a bunch of new ones of those, which was like $1 billion, you know, it's like a couple of billion or several $100 million worth of
what's
stuff
a bill between
doing.
friends? Don't worry about it.
Now, some of that was being manufactured in Australia. Some of it wasn't. So I think what they're doing basically is they're going to, in the short term, they're going to cancel 2/3 of the order for one of those. So we'll only get 129 IFVs instead of 450, whatever it was. And that sort of saves the budget at the moment. And then what they're saying is in the future, we're going to invest in missile technology. So the concept being is, and what they've seen in the war in Ukraine as well, is that you need to have missiles that are fast, that they're intelligent, and that they will travel long distances. At the moment, Australia doesn't have a long-range strike capability. We used to when we had the F-111 plane that was specifically bought basically so we could bomb Jakarta if we needed to. So we've had nothing since then. They got phased out like 10 years ago. So at the moment, the F-35s have got pretty limited range because they're big fuel guzzlers. So the concept being is, and one of the things, for instance, that they're tabling is they're going to buy these missile trucks effectively. So little, truck that you can fit like 2 or 3 of them in a plane. Each of them will carry 250 kilometer range missiles.
When you say missile trucks, I'm just imagining like a Hilux with a fucking RPG on the back.
Yeah,
I mean you could, but I mean no, they're a bit more advanced than that. But these missile trucks, you could, for instance, just go and park them on an island somewhere to the north, and all of a sudden you've set up an area denial for shipping, 250 kilometers long, right? So rather than, and the concept being is you can project that out, so you don't have to necessarily, you could have it either on your shore, or you could go to Papua New Guinea and say, hey, Papua New Guinea, what if we put one of these little trucks on your shore? And like ostensibly, these are one of the same sort of technologies that sunk some of the cruisers in the Black Sea with the Russians. So the Russian flagship that went down, one of these kind of vehicles was the thing that did it. So they seem to be effective. It's all about sort of, I guess, the missile technology that you pair it with, and probably the supporting elements, radar and that kind of thing that go around it. So that's kind of what they're talking about, is the ability to be able to go, if there's someone coming, we'll try and annihilate them before they come, rather than getting to the point of having them on our doorstep and then having to fight a major land war, which we obviously lose.
The idea is about projecting power beyond just our immediate area. I get it. So the initial amount is fully funded in that what they're doing, like you say, they're cutting money from some areas of the budget for defence, these armoured personnel carriers, etc. And then they're going to use that $7.8 billion that they get from that to fund this sort of change in strategic objectives. Now, I guess the reason they're doing that is because Labor doesn't want a brand new big hole in the budget. They're like, hey, budget week's covered up, and we got to make it look like we've at least got a path to get back into the black. But
everyone's still convinced that matters.
Yeah, as though anyone actually cares about that.
That's not how country, but like national budgets work. But
all of a sudden, Labor's trying to be the responsible, the adults in the room, trying not to spend all their pocket money at once.
What? But, Labor's just diet liberal now?
Yeah, that's shock. Just brace for shock. The government has also estimated, though, that the cost of implementing the full review over the 4-year budget period will cost an additional $19 billion. So it is definitely something that's going to cost us a bunch of money in the longer term. They just don't want to. They're just putting that on the credit card for later. We'll suss that out later. It's like, I got a budget next week
to pay Paul, quite literally.
Yeah, and not Paul Keating. Look, I mean, different Paul.
The problem with this, like, this is stuff that's probably about 20 years overdue. And obviously, the pandemic's one thing that sort of probably made them realise all this, is that we are very reliant on overseas imports for all our defence hardware. So, but the same thing with the subs. Like, this is all very long-term stuff. Like, to be able to get missile manufacturing up and running in Australia, like that's not something we do right now. We don't do that at all.
Yeah.
We've only got, like, in terms of ships, we've only got a couple of ships that, like, the amount of ships that we've got that can even shoot missiles off them as well, if you want to use the Navy as an example, there's not that many of them. So, like, we're years and years away from developing the hardware to really, and the manufacturing base and the defense industrial complex to be able to really support any of this.
I don't understand when it comes to questions of, like, they talked about job seeker this week. The government review came back and said, like, job seeker is woefully inadequate for people who are...
Definitely raise it at least 40%.
Yeah, 40%.
The response.
Yeah, so we're asking people to live off a couple of $100s a week, and the government says, sorry, me so sorry, no
really
money.
Tight right now.
But there's, mate, I'm just strapped for cash. I mean, just give us, come back to us in 12 months. We'll see what we can do. But there's always money in the banana stand for the defense industrial complex. Yep. And, you get people like David Spears going on television talking about military hardware, just like jacking it, fucking talking about missiles for 40 minutes. Like boys playing with toys. Peter Harcher on there going, oh, mate, you got to see these fucking missiles, mate. They're so fucking good, mate. But when it comes to, like, a discussion about job seeker, it's just like, oh, well, there's no money for that. Poor people going to pour, like, dab. See you later. I find it so immensely frustrating, because it's like, to me, all of this strategic review and, like, regional conflict and, defending against China, not China, like, none of that matters if our citizenry falls into a state of privation. Like, none of that like, it really doesn't matter if we can defend ourselves against China or not, if the country has more or less fallen apart because there's a really, tiny portion of haves and then a sea of have-nots, and the country falls into some kind of, French Revolution-esque, fucking guillotine hellscape. Like, none of it. The first responsibility of a country is to look after its own citizens, not to get cool missiles that can shoot real far good.
Yeah, I mean, the
you
likelihood
argue-
of them actually using any of these, it's all about deterrence, right? And you heard them. Yeah,
that's where they'll argue that this is about protecting their citizenry. We'll protect them from enemies. But no, I'm with you, George.
Or is deterrence, is framing the calculus in that way, basically saying there is no way to prove a return on investment on the investments that we make in the military industrial complex. You have to invest the money because you have to, right? And if you don't, who knows what might happen? The damage could be incalculable. But like,
well, the King of England could come in here and start bossing us around.
Exactly. And it's like, well, yeah, if you frame it in that way, like it's impossible to prove the negative, right? And say like, you know, every dollar that we conceivably passes through Australian government hands should go into defense spending, because who knows what might happen if we don't have defense spending. Like,
don't say that too loud, George.
It's just circular logic. It's completely specious. It's like, we know for a fact that we have needs with regard to homelessness. We know for a fact that we have needs with regard to the hospital system, with nurse shortages, with teacher shortages, with a lack of affordable housing. There's lots of things. There's no shortage of priorities for which we can get a demonstrable ROI. But as soon as it comes to the military, all bets are off. And we're just like, oh, but who knows what it's going to cost? And all of these projects, by the way, all of these massive, they all blow out because they always do. I remember when I was studying project management as part of my MBA, that mega projects like this always blow out because there's so many moving parts. There's lots of people, lots of different shifting responsibilities, lots of supply chains. It's extremely, extremely complicated. So to say, oh yeah, we'll just tip in an initial, an extra 19 billion over a 4-year period. By the time we get to that end of the 4-year period, it's going to be fucking 40 billion, because that's the way these things work. They always work that way with mega projects. So I'm just completely unsatisfied that this is the best ROI that we could get for this money for our country at this stage, when we've got so many serious problems in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic that we could be addressing with this money that we know would have an actual benefit. I'm just immensely frustrated by it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that I guess defense spending as a proportion of GDP will keep increasing as well as part of all this. So,
good.
Yeah. I mean, the question as well probably is like, because if you ask the feds, they'll say, oh, well, it's actually health and education's a state issue.
I love a good state issue.
And then people talk about raising the GST to try and sort of
but in the next story, all of these state issue, building stadiums in Hobart, that should be a state issue. That's not actually a federal responsibility. But when it comes to things that the federal government wants to do, all of a sudden they can find a justification to tip whatever it is, $25 million into the project. So things are only state and federal responsibilities to the extent that the federal government wants to get involved in them or not.
There's definitely been, I think probably since the Turnbull government, more of a focus on developing, defense infrastructure locally. But, the big projects, which are basically, if you exclude the Joint Strike Fighter aspect, but if you any naval stuff, it's just been, as you said, it's been a giant sort of, just a what do they call it? Expanding balloon, basically, in terms of how much money all of these projects take. Like whether it be the landing the helicopters that they fucked up, whether it be the landing ships that had to get their propulsion system fixed, whether it be
and if you turn around,
warfare destroyers that cost more than they were meant to.
And if you turn around and say we never actually used any of this shit, it's a black hole of money. You go, see, well, that's perfect because everyone was so threatened by us that we didn't have to use them. Like that means we did an A+ job as we completely wasted our fucking money. I
hate to drop too many Simpsons episodes references in this episode, but this rock keeps tigers away.
Yeah, exactly. Lisa, I would like to purchase this rock.
Yeah, you can't prove that, but I don't see any tigers.
Yeah.
I think the thing as well for the government, if you look at the war in Ukraine and all the sort of argy-bargy around Taiwan, like the amount of fear that's out there now, definitely it's like a politically correct time to do this. If you're going to spend the money, it's good to do it when people are feeling scared. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like we are trying to spend more money than we have. But it's
not just that. We are spending more money than we have. Okay, the budget. I'm sure we're going to see the budget. Forward estimates in the budget next week or the week after or whatever it is, and I guarantee we're going to be in some form of deficit at least for the next. Whatever the next couple of budget cycles, and then you get more than sort of 4 or 5 years out, and then everything just magically goes into the black. That tends to be how it works. But like we are in deficit, which means we are borrowing money. We are then incurring costs. Yeah, right. Who's buying the debt? Probably China. Hey, hey China, can I borrow some money? I got this cool missile thing, which is about not China that I need to provide for, but. We're borrowing money to then put into, if you're going to be borrowing money in a context where interest rates are higher, the cost of borrowing and maintaining that and servicing that debt is higher now than it has been in years past. You better have a fucking good reason to borrow that money. And to just pour it into defense projects seems like, I don't know, it honestly reminds me of like boys with their toys. Yeah. Boys with their, bro, I got the fucking Hot Wheels with the sick, the flame on the side, it makes it go faster. No, bro, I got the fucking Mack truck, bro. No, I got the missile silo, bro. It's fucking sick.
Definitely. And like the thing is, like if you think about it traditionally in terms of like historically, in terms of like where Australia's defence spending has gone, most of it has been we've bought stuff off other countries. Yeah. Ships we used to buy off the UK quite regularly.
But they have a shipping industry. You know what I mean? Like the cost to production for each one of those vehicles for us to buy it rather than set up a manufacturing industry. It's way cheaper. The return on investment is substantially better for us because we don't have to set up an entire industry from scratch that we don't have. So like,
and that was my point is that, the reason why this is more expensive than it used to be is because precisely that is that we are the ones stumping up the cost to make it all work. And, the new types of technologies and despite the fact that each ship, for instance, will have less people on it, they are so much more complex than old ships used to be, is that your maintenance for these vehicles, whether it be a new modern battle tank or whether it be a ship or a plane, a Joint Strike Fighter is a great example. It's not just a plane. It's like an entire computing system.
Yeah, it's 50 computers in a plane. Yeah.
Yeah. Everything's top secret. So the problem being is that to run these things, the cost to run these things per, hour or day or whatever is exponentially more than it used to be because they are so much more complex. So while you need less people around, you still need to spend more money to make the thing work.
Forgive me if this is like too much of a dumb, like normie, uninformed question, but like if we accept the analysis of the China-America conflict, I think the popular analysis is that America has been the number one hegemon globally, the big swinging dick in terms of ruling the global order and getting their way. They're sort of a declining power. China's the rising power, and there's going to be some sort of, potentially regional conflict over Taiwan as a result of it. I'm confused as to why Australia, given where we are in proximity to China, has gone like, oh, great, the US is a declining power. Let's throw our lot in with the US. It's like, the guys who are slipping in the ranks, let's back that horse. That just seems to be very confusing to me. Like,
I think it's
because previously we maintained like an ambiguity as to like, okay, we deal with China, we deal with the US, like, we're not trying to step on anyone's toes. We're trying to do what's best for us and try and maintain stability in the region. That seems to be like the Kevin Rudd era of how we handled that sort of conflict. And now it's just like, fuck China, suck eggs, bro. We're all in with the US, baby.
Militarily, we've been sucking the US's tit since halfway through World War II. And we've been, and that hasn't changed. So, while the investments that we're making and the amount of collaboration we have, whether it be intel sharing or whatever, that's probably increased a little bit. Like the ANZUS, whatever it's called, treaty is still a thing.
But we've been making all our money from China's growing economy. So it's like by shipping them iron ore and, all these new export markets that have been developed with regards to wine and grain and livestock and, produce and all this sort of stuff like that. It's all well and good to toss in with the Yanks because they're the ones who can give us cool submarines. But like our bread is buttered in China.
from an economic standpoint. Very much so. Like, they're our biggest trading partner.
It's a strategic question that no one's been able to answer, George, for the last 20 years, and I doubt they'll be able to answer for the next 20 years. I would argue that if it really depends on how hard China goes when they eventually make a move on Taiwan. If it's a pretty limited conflict, the US might be able to get away with just potentially sending some planes and some warships and not actually putting any ground troops in, which means we might not do anything. We might just let the whole thing. We're not obligated to do anything with Taiwan.
Biden seems pretty chill with the idea of like going to bat with troops on the ground for Taiwan. He's saying that publicly in multiple occasions. He's like, "Oh yeah, we fucking got to go in there." I was just like, this doesn't seem like strategic ambiguity to me. It seems like extremely fucking not ambiguity to be like, "Yes, we will go to bat for the Taiwanese on multiple occasions."
Biden is probably the first US president to really specifically outline it publicly. But yeah, it's a question that really, the Americans war game this every 12 months with different possibilities to see what would happen. Like, it's an unknown. It's where no one knows. And then, is China just going to be focused around Taiwan, or are they going to also, put a blocking zone in the South China Sea? If they do that, does that therefore expand the conflict, which means we have to get involved?
Yeah, and I don't want to.
There are so many questions, right?
And I don't want to, underplay the importance of the regional conflict that's happening in the South China Sea. But like, if we were the Philippines, I feel very differently about it. If I was Indonesia, or if I was Taiwan, especially, I feel very differently about it. But like, there's like several layers of countries between us and China. So I don't understand why, when we have such pressing problems facing us, like particularly in terms of homelessness and the affordability of housing, people like literally living on the streets, living on a JobKeeper rate that was like insufficient 5 years ago and is definitely insufficient now. Like, why is this where we're wanting to put our money? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, speaking of all that, so speaking of there being 2 reviews into things commissioned by the government, and they've just decided to listen to one and not the other one. They're not raising job seeker, or it's now just job seeker rather than New Start and all that sort of stuff. But you know what they are doing? They're building a stadium. They're building a stadium in Adam's hometown.
Yeah, so
isn't that fun? Did you need a stadium, Adam, when you were back home?
After nearly 80 years of when's Tassie going to get its own football team? It looks like hopefully by this time next week, Tasmania will have approval for a 19th AFL license. There's a lot about this. There's a lot of context and stuff around it, but basically, Tasmania's been, since I was probably in high school, they've been seriously trying to push for an AFL team. It was an election promise of one of the old Labor premiers that they'll get one within 5 years. And then each premier seems to have sort of, that is like part of their election pitch that Tasmania will eventually get an AFL team. Tasmania being one of the few states that AFL is a sort of foundation sport in. Anyway, over the last however many years, they've been sort of trying to make their latest push to get it, and it looks like they are going to get it. But thank God. Oh, sweating. I was worried Tasmania weren't going to get their fucking stadium. Oh, that is such a relief. Who's to say that we don't report good news? Yeah, every now and then there's a positive news story, and we get in there. We report it. The news isn't all doom and gloom. Sometimes there's a positive story, like Tasmania is going to get a fucking stadium they don't need. That's fantastic news. One of the things that's requirements that the AFL outlined to grant the license was that Tasmania needed to have a modern multi-purpose 23,000 seat stadium, basically, to sell enough cash back into the league, I guess, eventually.
And somewhere, I guess, to host matches, right?
Well, this is the thing, Tom. Right. There's already 2 main stadiums that the AFL matches are played at in Tasmania. There's one in the north. Yeah, but you want to have one wear, one wash. That's the rule.
Yeah, you need one stadium for every room of the house.
There's one across the river in Bellarive, which fits about 16,000 people, and I think the one in Northern Tasmania is about the same. So they want one that's bigger than that and that is, more connected, more modern, yada, yada, yada.
Why?
So there's that aspect. And then there's a second thing to this, which isn't really reported a whole lot, which has been the Macquarie Point redevelopment. So since I was a child, they stopped running. The rail yards used to end in the port of Hobart.
Mm-hmm.
The government went, that's dumb. We're not going to do that because most of our freight goes to the north of the state. We're going to rip the rail yards up. And then we'll use Macquarie Point or Macquarie Point. Currently, there's a sewage treatment plant also sitting smack bang in the middle of it. We're going to use that area we're going to redevelop it, rejuvenate it. We're going to fucking make something special. And then everyone's gone, so what are you going to make? And then for the last 20 years, they have been going, yeah, good. Yeah, we're just doing lots of research. We're just doing so much feasibility studies and
we're going to make something good. Oh, yep, we're making it, and it's going to be good.
15 years ago, they were like, should we put a new hospital there? Because the health system's pretty fucked. And then they went, yeah, that's a great idea. And then 5 years later, they did not do that. They backed away from that faster than they can.
They've decided they're going to put an AFL stadium in there. It's a $715 million project, 715 million. So the Tasmanian government has committed $375 million of that. 15 million from the AFL. Seems like the AFL isn't really that gung-ho about making sure that there's a stadium. And $85 million in borrowings against land sale or lease for commercial uses. So that's basically, selling or borrowing against Crown land, I assume. And there's a $240 million gap for the Commonwealth to fill. And Anthony Albanese's government has announced the federal government will contribute that $240 million gap for the stadium at Hobart Waterfront. Now, what happens when there are inevitably cost overruns, as there always are with mega projects? As I said earlier, who's going to foot the bill for that? Probably the federal government, because it's the lender of last resort in that situation. No one, the AFL's not going to go, we're just going to chip in another 40 mil. Like, they're not going to do that. They're a private institution. Why would they? The government's going to have to step in and save the project inevitably when it inevitably overruns. So that 240 million is probably going to look more like 300, maybe 400 million by the time this thing's actually done.
And it will overrun, and I'll tell you why.
It will,
You're sitting on an old rail yard. I mean, they've done a lot of cleanup of that, but there is like 100 years worth of oil just like dredged through the soil of that site. So, and it's also, a lot of it's reclaimed land. Like the Hobart, the natural coastline of Hobart never went out that far. Like, it's reclaimed land, where the right-hand side of that site is actually an area that used to be called, it was actually an island. It was called Hunter Island.
Right.
And then they just filled it in gradually over 70 years after colonization. Anyway, so firstly, I don't know how much cleanup's been done. I don't know how, and they haven't also agreed on where the stadium will go. You look at all the artwork. Sometimes it's on the ocean side. Sometimes it's on the city side. No one agrees.
No one knows
where it's actually going to go.
Cool.
The other thing is, Hobart transport fucking sucks. They get 9,000 people to go to an AFL game in Bellarive, which is the other side of the river, and traffic is a gridlock for like 3 hours. There is no trains. There is one ferry, and the rest of it's just buses.
So even if they were able to attract the kinds of crowds that they would need to fill the stadium,
they wouldn't be able to deal with it.
There's no infrastructure around it to actually deal with it. Yeah.
No.
And there's a report from Smart Cities Dive, and the headline of which, this is basically all you need to know about this: taxpayer-funded football stadiums rarely pay off. So why do cities keep footing the bill? And it's an analysis of it's largely to do with American stadiums and cities and things like that. But the thrust of the report is basically, over the 30-year period that they looked at, that they did the analysis over, the local economic development from sports teams and venues didn't offset the public investment provided to build them. That's because most spending at stadiums is done by local residents using the money that they would have spent at other nearby businesses, the researchers said. So it's like, it is a common thing that these stadiums, these mega projects like this, don't end up paying for themselves. They don't end up being good investments because people spend money going to the footy there that they would have spent going to a restaurant down the road. So the net benefit to the economy is precisely fucking nothing.
Yeah, it doesn't create more money.
No.
I mean, to get a flight to Tassie at the moment, for instance, it's like, there are like 4 flights a day on one airline, 4 flights a day on the other airline if you're coming from Melbourne. So, it's not like there's a floodgate of that'll open, and then all of a sudden we'll have, mass migration to Tasmania and 23,000 people just traveling down there to see the footy. And people do travel for the footy. I'm not saying they don't.
It's a thing, yeah.
But traditionally games in Hobart have attracted max like 15,000 people. The stadium in the south of the state fits about 16. The stadium to the north is a bit more, but like you would rarely get sellouts.
Yeah, you're not even maxing out the 16,000 capacity that you have now, let alone to me it's just like absolutely witless that we would commit hundreds of millions of dollars on a federal, like if Tasmania wants to do, if they want to put $375 million of their, state revenue, if they think it's a worthwhile endeavor for their state, I guess fine. I mean, I think you're wrong, but whatever, go ahead. It's not my money. Yeah, but when the federal government comes in and goes, not only do we think that we believe this is absolutely fucking necessary for the country, for Hobart to have another stadium that it doesn't fucking need, and we're going to put in 240 million plus, who knows, dollars into this. Like it just enrages me.
This is the thing with Hobart, is that most of the time, if there is a big infrastructure project, it is the federal government that pays for it. The state government just does. With a population of 500,000, there is not the tax revenue to fund big infrastructure projects.
Maybe you shouldn't be building fucking stadiums for no reason. Then maybe you should look at your fucking hospitals.
In the infrastructure department, is my first job out of school. They are now building the project, the bridge up the river in the south. This is in the Hobart area. There's a bridge up the river that they're now building and replacing. They're replacing a bridge, building another one. That was earmarked in 2007 or 8. So what's that?
Right on time.
Yeah.
15 years.
15 years it's taken them to get a bridge project off the floor.
Yeah.
Which was seen as like, state importance.
It's bananas. And just for them to be doing this, I think this is what a lot of like local people in Tassie who've been protesting this sort of stuff have been talking about, and also just people around the country, of this coming off the back of saying, nah, we're not going to raise job seeker. We're not going to do anything about like rent gouging. We're not going to do anything about affordable housing, blah, 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 blah. But you can have a stadium, as people who showed up at like Albo's press conference. I've got a clip of that, yeah. Excellent mentioned was that people can't eat stadiums. Like there's a cost of living crisis.
Yeah, I think it was Stalin who said you got to give the populace bread and circuses to keep them happy. At the very least, they got to have bread, dude. Like you can't have the circuses if they can't eat. Anyway, this is Anthony Albanese getting interrupted.
Talk to me. I remember having a discussion.
Let's talk about housing, Prime Minister.
Do you want to? Yeah, I think you've had your say.
Well, haven't you're having your say at the back of the sewage works where no one knows what's going on. This is such a huge development in Tasmania. Here we are stuck in this tiny little spot at the back of the sewage.
Okay, thanks.
To make an announcement about all this money.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Anya person. Yeah.
Give him what for? This is the thing with Tasmania is they have, I think it's the worst rental availability in the country.
Yeah.
Something, Cook. As someone who's now currently trying to rent somewhere in Sydney, I can tell you it fucking sucks. So if Tassie has the worst, Jesus, I can't.
Well, I think Sydney's got availability. It's just expensive. Hobart just has no availability.
Yeah.
To the point where during the pandemic, people were sleeping in the showgrounds. Like
hey, well now they have a whole new showground to sleep in.
There is and the reason for that is that Hobart, Tasmania in general, has not built large housing developments since like the 70s. There's been some growth around Sorrel. This is in the south of the state. There's been some growth around Sorrel. There's been some growth around Brighton. That's it.
The Tasmanian government in Jan of this year announced that they're going to create 900 lots for housing across the state. But I mean, who knows?
But this is the thing: is that
10,000 new homes by 2032. Okay, but it's like 2023. Like this is
how you gonna build that?
That's even 10,000 new homes over 10 years is woefully inadequate for the amount of demand.
Hell yeah.
That's occurring right now.
And I don't know, and I feel that person in the background of Albo's press conference there was absolutely right to be grilling him on something like this, especially when so much of their campaigning was all about cost of living, New Start needing to go up, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, we took you at your word,
while
guys.
They're ignoring, and then while they've done their own, even they commissioned a review into this, and they said that they should be raising that rate, and there's been so many things about affordable housing. For Albo to stand there and say, all right, shut the fuck up. You had your say. Get fucked, man. Like,
it really, like, it reminds me of that episode of The Simpsons where it was like, the Republicans, and it's got a sign we're just terrible.
We're plain evil.
And we're just plain evil.
And ourselves,
and then the Democrats side was we're just like woefully inadequate or something like that.
We can't govern.
Yeah, we can't govern. Yeah, that's literally what it reminds me of. It's like, the conservative side of politics will do like evil, nonsensical shit and
just commit to it.
And the Labor side of politics will just kind of do like, I don't know, small, incremental, like still keeping the corporate overlords and the donors happy, but like every now and then they'll throw us a bone and be like, "Oh, we're going to do some new houses. You guys like new houses? Yeah. We'll tweak the super balance. Only super balance is over 3 million though. We don't want to make the corporate overlords too bad. It's like just tinkering. There's a little tinkering around the edges, but we need like big change, and it's just not happening.
We needed it yesterday,
and we needed it fucking 10 years ago.
It's fucking insane. And that, I don't know if this sort of plays into this as much, but there's been talk about, people calling for rent freezes and stuff like that. And everyone's fucking freaking out. And it's like, fucking what? Why are you freaking out? People will still be paying rent. It just can't be absorbently like overgouged.
Well, the thing is that because over the last 10 years, and this is a whole other thing with property, but like because property prices have gone ballistic and now no one can afford to pay them because of interest rates. A lot of people are just assuming that the rent should be able to cover their mortgage, which is not the case. Like, because
the government's not obligated to provide you a completely safe investment at a high yield. Like, I'm sorry, that's not the government's job is to subsidize your fucking investments. Like, it's just not. So, all these free market capitalists, the hand of the free market. It's the free market, mate. We just gotta let the invisible hand of the market fucking jerk me off. And they're like, wait a minute, the rent I got in was this much, and the mortgage I had was more than the rent. Government, save me! Help me, government! I want some big government to come in and help me out.
No, and it's people then arguing against the concept, like, the landlords arguing against like the concept of rent freezes for that very reason of either, they want to maximize their profit, or because mortgage payments are going up, et cetera, they feel they should be able to keep pace. But the knock-on effect on that is that you might make someone homeless. You might make the person not be able to afford to be paying the rent you're already getting. So you might kick them out of your fucking house when the end result, the end commodity is shelter for a person.
Yeah. It's a market failure.
That's what matters.
And the problem is when it's a market failure in terms of like fucking candy bars, no one cares because like you can just buy different candy bars or not eat candy bars. That's fine. But like if the market failure is for something as integral as shelter, like that is a complete failure of our system to adequately address the needs of its populace. Like that you can't just, there is a threshold at which you can, it's called rent stress or mortgage stress, where it's I think it's like 33% of your income, no more than 33% of your income should be devoted to housing. If it's more than that, you're living in a situation where you're rent stressed. If you're paying 50 or 60% of your income to housing, as some people are, like the effect of landlords wanting to raise their rates because more profit, like. If it was any other industry, if it was any other kind of investment, you go, well, the people take what the market can bear. But when it comes to candy bars, no one gives a shit. When it comes to housing, it is a societal detriment to all of us to have additional people that are homeless because then that has other effects in the economy. But like the housing market doesn't care. They just want to get their nut. They want to get their monthly number because that's what I feel as though I should be earning because that's what I earn
yesterday. And there's nothing in the rules that says that should be the case. Like sometimes you made a bad investment and you fucked up and you're going to have to eat shit on that investment for a little while. That's the danger of investing. But when it comes to housing, I don't know. They just expect all these special treatments and special
Specifically
attention.
with Tasmania is that there is a large working class population and they don't earn $90,000.
Well, that's the thing. Wages haven't gone up. Wages aren't going up. So it's not a case of like, the textbook macroeconomics explanation of inflation, which is like, well, if inflation's happening, that's because everyone's got a bunch of money sloshing around in their pockets and therefore they've got more money to spend on things like housing or your products or whatever. But that's not the case. Wages have barely moved since the start of the pandemic. So it's not that people
have up a little bit, but only in certain sectors, not every sector.
But if you look at it against inflation, most people are going backwards. Most people aren't getting 8% raises. Forget about getting ahead. People are barely keeping pace with inflation. So you might get a 5% raise, but if inflation was 7%, you've actually gone backwards by 2%. Your money is worth less, 2% less this year than it was the year before, even if you got a quote unquote raise. So I just don't understand where I saw this. Dave, I think it was Dave Anthony, the comedian, posted. It was like a Reddit forum or something like that, where a landlord was saying something to the effect of like, I know I could get more for the market rate for my apartment for my, should I raise the rent on my apartment? I don't need the money. And the woman who lives there is a single mother. Should I raise the rate anyway? And it's just like, man, there's no wonder people fucking hate landlord. I don't need the money, so just fucking leave it how it is, man. She's a single mum. She's just barely getting by. Like, just fucking leave her alone. But the landlord's like, should I stooge this fucking single mother just because I can?
Having that thought to wanting to ask that hypothetical, that it did not occur to them that it's like, oh, but if I do that, then maybe the tenant can't afford it.
Maybe it's going to fuck someone's life if I do this.
But then you stop getting money in until a new tenant turns up. And there's never been a landlord myself. And there's costs involved in changing tenants over. So maybe you just don't.
Well, they build that into the equation. When landlords look at whether they should kick someone out and get someone else in, all of those equations as to like how long is it likely to stay empty and is the amount of money that I lose from kicking someone out and then waiting time to get someone else in worth the amount of increase that I'm going to get over time. But when you have a situation in Hobart where there's like 1% availability in housing stock, you're going to get someone in straight away, and they're probably going to come in, during the inspection and go, how you want the 500 a week? I'll give you 550 for a week. If you'll actually have people illegally bidding up the rental price because they're so desperate for housing. You'll have a line around the block. Like, this is what happens when there's a rental shortage.
That's the fucking worst.
You'll never have a situation where there's no occupancy in your apartment. You're always going to make more. And it's like, maybe you could just not make more and allow the single mum to stay in her home. Like, I just don't understand why everything needs to be. It's this 40 years of neoliberal politics where everything has been reduced to a profit P&L fucking sheet, profit and loss. And maybe some things like housing and shelter, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, number one on the list, maybe that thing shouldn't be commoditized in the way that it has been. Maybe we should be making some sort of effort to get people into homes and keep them off the street, because we're all the poorer when that happens.
Yep. And Albo's doing nothing about it. So
the stadium looking good.
But we got a new stadium, so that's fucking sweet.
Anyway, footy, going around in circles for
footy house.
¿Por qué no los dos? I think the state government in Tassie needs to step up with housing. There's a whole bunch of other things with Tasmania which are very specific to that geographic location. But yeah, they need to pull their finger out of their ass and just do some stuff. And then if people get shitty about it, tough.
No, it's all right. We announced a housing future fund, so that'll be good in 10 years for something.
Yeah,
maybe
in the future. So rather than using the money to build houses now, we're going to have a fund that we're going to get the interest off that fund hopefully we're going to invest that. Hopefully it grows. And then the interest off that growth, we're going to use to build a small number of houses in the future. Does that work for you guys? Does that help?
Well, I mean, it's not a bad idea. I mean, the interest they're saying
not a good one.
$500 million a year. Well, there needs to be something to fund it. But, I mean, average house price would be about, $300,000 to build it? Maybe something like that. 400,000. If you're doing like small 4-bedroom, 20 square houses, about $400,000 to build it.
Just scrap those stage 3 tax cuts. There's some money right there.
There's some money. I found some money in the banana stand.
Yeah,
I took the military industrial complex and I turned it upside down and $400 million fell out of its pockets. It's crazy.
Yeah, bananas. All right. I stopped talking about that sort of shit, I guess. We've harped on about it.
It's not good for my blood pressure.
For a good long time. Do we want to talk about some good news?
Yeah, sure.
Tucker Carlson's gone from Fox.
I mean, that's nice.
That's pretty good. Couldn't believe it when I saw that announcement. I was like, are you serious? Like, did he resign or was he fired? And it all seems like he was fired.
Oh, yeah. No, he got the
or
ass
at least
for sure.
asked to resign or whatever. But yeah, following, the settlement of the Dominion case against Fox News and all that sort of stuff, this past Monday US time, Tucker Carlson was informed that his last show on Fox had aired the Friday before, that he was gone, that he was out. And it isn't explicit as to why, although given all the stories we've had over the past couple months of the text messages that he's been sending back and forth, and there's been mentions of like allegations of awful like sexist workplace culture and all this sort of stuff, hardly seems surprising. I think
misogyny and bullying.
Yeah. Is just pretty bonkers that like, wow, that's what it took. It's one of those like, yeah, why now? Why not 20 years ago? I guess he wasn't on Fox News 20 years ago, but
it's 20 years ago. He was on NBC, believe it or not.
Yeah, he's been on CNN and shit as well.
MSNBC, yeah.
Yeah, they got rid of their Fox pushed out their biggest show host. That still baffles me. Like, especially given how much of a panic they were seeing, like, during all this following the US election kind of stuff of like, wait, we started telling the truth and the audience moved elsewhere. Fuck. That in this case, like, if you push Tucker out, won't all the people who were like, oh, fuck, Tucker was the best, speaking all the truth to whatever, like, I believe, whatever horseshit, won't they be frustrated and move to wherever he goes?
Yeah, there has been a bit of an exodus from Fox News. So, granted, they've got some nobodies in there sort of filling the time slot while they find a new host. The ratings have been lower than they ever have been, and ratings for competing, hyper-conservative, batshit crazy news sites like, OAN and things like that have increased. Fox News shares slid by 4% on the announcement of the news. So it's not good, but I think the message from Fox is like, we've done this a bunch of times before. Like, we did it with Hannity, we did it with O'Reilly. Like, we made you, we can fucking break you, and we can bring someone else in the same time
we can find
slot.
Another generic, confused-faced white man.
Yeah, but believe it or not,
screaming awful racist shit.
We can find another racist shitbag with a bow tie in order to, talk shit about the replacement theory. So it doesn't seem as though like Fox is in any sort of existential trouble as a result of this. I think it's more the continuing sort of Smartmatic lawsuits and other things are going to be the thing that really, if there is something that undoes them, it'll be the money rather than losing Tucker Carlson. But there was obviously he was named in a lawsuit by that Fox producer. So there was a cruel and misogynistic workplace. He was instrumental in the Dominion lawsuit, which cost them a bunch of money, saying, that he hated Trump and all this sort of stuff when, those texts came to light. And there was also an allegation that he called one of the senior Fox executives a cunt. And that came out in the depositions and emails and stuff as well. So I think it was just like, you cost your company $1 billion and you call your boss a cunt. That's 3 strikes and you're out, buddy. Like that's enough.
And that's similar to what O'Reilly happened with Bill O'Reilly, wasn't it? That
he had a bunch of sexual harassment lawsuits and things like that. Yeah,
that you sort of become bigger than the network, and it's a distraction. So see you later.
Too big for your britches. Yeah, there was even talk of him entering into conservative politics at some stage. So I do think he got a bit too big for his boots, and now he's suffering the consequences. But you get the impression that there was a little video he posted on Twitter.
Yeah, his little 2-minute villain monologue.
Yeah, literally reminded me of that Kevin Spacey, like, "Oh, I'm not done with you yet." That weird video he posted after he got fired from House of Cards.
And that's not the comparison you want to be having made about you.
No, as
not
a rule.
with Kevin Spacey.
Should we hear some of the villain monologue, or?
Sure, why not?
Good evening, it's Tucker Carlson. One of the first things you realize when you step outside the few days is how many genuinely nice people there are in this country. Kind and decent people who really care about what's true, and a bunch of hilarious people also. A lot of those. It's got to be the majority of the population, even now. So that's heartening. The other thing you notice when you take a little time off is how unbelievably stupid most of the debates you see on television are. They're completely irrelevant. They mean nothing. In 5 years, we won't even remember that we had them. Trust me, as someone who's participated.
I said a lot of dumb shit.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, his whole thing of like, you won't believe the state of terrible news debate. Yeah, no thanks to you.
Yeah, thanks chiefly to you, shithead.
Yeah, it's just like, oh man, public discourse is cooked. Gee, I wonder who's responsible for that, you fuck.
Yeah, if only there was someone who worked in the news media who could do something like this. Anyway, it seems like he's sort of setting the stage there for some kind of, maybe he's going to go work at the Blaze or, one of these shit-staying conservative, organizations.
On his own Alex Jones-esque podcast, but who knows?
He's talking about the sort of paucity of the debate in the media, and like, there's only a certain number of people who you can rely on to tell you the truth, and I'm one of them. Come follow me on Mastodon. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we'll see what happens, but I'm guaranteed that the shithead's going to land somewhere with big salary, so good for him.
Yeah,
not actually good for him. That was a sarcasm parenthetical I should put there.
So fuck him.
Bad for all of us.
Yeah, but he's gone at least, so there's a little bit of Schadenfreude in that. Alrighty, what do we want to wrap up with?
Do you want to tell us about this Magic the Gathering story? This is this
was just interesting. Quite shocking. So getting a little nerdy here. So a YouTuber I think goes by the tag Old School MTG. So for Old School Magic the Gathering, his whole channel is all about like checking out Magic the Gathering cards, unboxing booster packs, and all that sort of stuff.
What is Magic the Gathering?
Yes,
Magic the Gathering is a tabletop card-based kind of battle game made by the company Wizards of the Coast, who also make Dungeons and Dragons, and they're a subsidiary of Hasbro.
I know you're going to probably get mad at me for like simplifying this for the normies, but if anyone played the Pokemon card game, it's not dissimilar. Like
sure. I'd never really played Magic.
I don't know. I'm just trying to speak to millennials that to give them some sort of point of reference that they would understand.
Millennials would know Magic the Gathering.
I don't know. Not all of them.
It was huge when I was a teenager.
I played Magic the Gathering. I played Pokemon. I'm just trying to give people a reference point. It's a card game. Enough. Yeah, Pikachu's got X number of hit points. You put that on the table. You play Pikachu. That sort of thing. So it's similar sort of idea.
So this YouTuber, does a whole bunch of content around Magic the Gathering, and he was purchasing some booster packs for one of the recent runs of Magic the Gathering's expansions. It was an expansion referred to as March of the Machine, and he went to his buyer, like the person he buys them from. They gave him the packs, and he opened them all up and realized that these were cards from a unreleased aspect of the expansion called March of the Machine, The Aftermath. And he was like, cool, these are the new cards that are coming out in 2 weeks. Like, sick, I've got some. Showed them on his channel, did all these videos, all this sort of stuff, like over a couple of days of the week. And then on the Saturday morning, after he had done all these videos, some Pinkerton agents turned up at his house.
Did you? I didn't even know
those Pinkertons.
Yeah, I didn't even know the Pinkertons were still a thing.
They still exist.
What are the Pinkertons?
The Pinkertons. So yes, the Pinkertons, founded sort of in the 1800s, 1850s in America, were basically labor busters. Union busters.
They're the guys in the movie in the water and on the waterfront where they go, hey, we got to send some guys in to bust some fucking heads for these unions. The Pinkertons were the guys that they would send.
But yeah, so like they were often used in the 1800s for like businesses would hire. They were like law for hire, like where you didn't have such like overarching police forces across. You could also get Pinkerton agents to like track down outlaws. Like they're the villains of Red Dead Redemption 2 and all that sort of stuff. Like the Pinkerton agents were hunting down cowboys.
Basically mercenaries, kind of like a private detective agency, essentially.
Yeah. But then people also hired them to be like, hey, could you spy on these workers who are trying to form unions and infiltrate their organizations? And also when we have riots over workers' rights, can you be on the side of the corporation beating the shit out of them? And they've existed since the fall of the Wild West and all that sort of stuff. I believe they're now owned by a Swedish company.
Cool.
Bought them out. But the company still exists. Amazon has used them in union busting efforts like as recently as 2020. Like, so they're still around. They've been around for 150 years.
I had no idea that the Pinkerton, and it doesn't help. I had no idea that they were still around, which is shocking to me. But I guess, of course, they are. There's always a market for union busting, I suppose. But the thing that really creeps me out is their logo is like, so the original logo was Pinkerton's National Detective Agency, and it sort of surrounds an eye, like the fucking eye on the top of the pyramid. Yeah. and the quote is beneath it says, "We never sleep," and it's just an open staring eye.
Jesus.
Even the new logo is kind of like an eye based kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know? So like, yeah, bad guy, not good guys.
Yeah. So anyway, these videos that the YouTuber put up revealed about 75% of the cards that are going to be in this new Magic the Gathering set. And as a result of that, Wizards of the Coast allegedly hired Pinkertons to turn up at his house, and they were like, you got some cards. We're going to need them cards. And he's like, what?
No,
I think his wife answered the door, and she was like, excuse me, hang on, I'll get him. Can you just wait outside? And she says they did the whole foot between the door and stuff as she tried to shut it and like force their way in. They were like really roughhousing them and stuff. They needed not only the cards, but the foil packs that they came in, like, and just raided the place. They gave them like, here's a number for someone at Wizards of the Coast to talk to that will verify the authenticity that we're here. Yeah, and so Wizards of the Coast have said like, oh, we tried like calling you to like say, hey, can you take down that content? That's embargoed shit. How do you have that? And you didn't answer the phone. And he's like, well, yeah, because I'm a fucking millennial and it was a private number. I'm not answering that shit. And so their thing was like, oh, damn, he didn't answer the phone. Better send thugs because of some playing cards. In
can't you just message the YouTube channel?
Email him?
Well, send a legal notice or something, like, you know.
Yeah, exactly. He was like, if I received a legal notice via email or whatever, like, I would have complied and taken down the shit because this is clearly a misunderstanding. Like, I was given the wrong stuff, like, because of the similarities in the names of the expansions and whatever. Lord knows how the guy who sold them to him had the shit early.
But if he bought them, hang on, like, he hasn't entered into any agreement with Wizards of the Coast around an embargo. He hasn't signed anything saying you're going to review our shit, and in exchange, you're not going to release anything until the 23rd. Yeah. Like, that's common practice.
To anything.
That's common practice for YouTubers. You've bought a product legally. And it's turned up at your door, you're entitled to do whatever the fuck you want with it.
And it's also not illegal to breach those like embargo agreements. Like you'll piss off the company and they might not work with you ever again. But if he had entered an agreement to like keep tight-lipped on this and then broke that, that's not a crime.
They would sue you.
You can't just
that's how that works.
You can't just send hired goons around to his house.
Ding dong, who is it? Hired goons.
Yeah, just so many, like, it's just bananas. And this is allegedly not the first time that Wizards of the Coast have used Pinkertons to do their shit. There's been some other incidents of like Pinkerton agents being hired for like to chase down various kind of like leaks or things like that. And also there's just some connections to Wizards of the Coast as well, that like a former vice president of the company had previously was previously a Pinkerton detective or something like that. Like, you know,
they've obviously got a relationship.
There's a relationship going on here. The current manager of global investigations for Wizards of the Coast is a former Pinkerton agent. So there you go. Not even previous employees, a current one is. But
one made up of the Pinkertons, Bob. Send Bob to get his goons in.
Sending some of the most infamous union busting, 1800s era thugs over Magic the Gathering cards is just absurd to me.
Wizards of the Coast, they also had something recently. They're the people who own Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yeah.
So I remember they had something not that like a couple of months ago where they were basically saying the Creative Commons license that we've got is basically we're just going to revoke that. So all of these of these companies that have built stuff that is based on Dungeons and Dragons would now have to give them a cut if they want to keep sort of operating in the Dungeons and Dragons universe. Like these seems like the only two things I've heard about Wizards of the Coast is them pulling some really fucking shady shit.
I think
they have also been behind the movie that came out recently.
Yeah. Well, it's an official
licensed
Dungeons and Dragons
content,
movie. So they're like the Tolkien estate in this analogy of like making a Lord of the Rings thing.
Yeah.
I think they backed off on the Creative Commons thing.
They did because everyone freaked the fuck. There's multiple multi-million-dollar businesses are based on this Creative Commons license about building extra content and other shit for this game. Like it's a creative community. You can't just go, and we changed my mind. Actually, it's all ours now.
Yeah, real fuck.
Very shonky.
Just I don't know. And it's just like, I've often thought about this, like whenever I forayed into like, news and reporting on like pop culture and game sort of stuff or whatever. You don't think you're entering as dangerous a territory as it sometimes sounds like it. Like this guy, his job, it seems at least, or something he does rather prominently, opening Magic card packs on camera for nerds to enjoy.
Okay,
you'd be like, free that seems fairly
advertising.
Innocuous.
It's free advertising for your shit. Why do you care? You fucking nerds.
That just seems like such a fairly innocuous way to spend your time, fairly like low key. Like he just, my husband hangs out in his studio and films opening his little card packs, and then armed goons to it.
And then you get swatted.
Like it's just bananas that has to be how that works. So yeah, real fucking poor form, Wizards of the Coast. Maybe send an email first before you resort to Pinkertons.
Yeah, maybe a cease and desist before you send some hired goons.
Yeah, absolutely bonkers.
All right. Well, I'm just hearing a knocking at the door. I think that might be my hired goons. On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at I'm coming! Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure I swear to God. Make sure you follow us on all the social media that have to or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and motherfucking TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
You can follow me down to Tasmania, where I'll be personally digging the foundations for this stadium to try and save Australia some money.
And I'm just going to go with these very nice gentlemen who have busted into my house. Thanks for listening, guys. I love your faces. We'll see you next week.
Is it bad that because we couldn't hear the knocking that you were doing, because probably Discord's filtering out the sound, I wasn't sure if you were still doing a bit or if you were just yelling at your wife.
Yelling at my wife.
I was like, George?
She might have some questions after the broadcast. Thanks for listening. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.